It's time for the show about the people and the places of the Carolinas with the occasional visitors. In addition to hosting the award-winning syndicated TV show Life in the Carolinas, Carl White writes a weekly syndicated column and now hosts this weekly show, the Life in the Carolinas podcast. Now you can hear the story about the stories. And now, here's your host, Carl White.
Jay Raffaldini. Wow, how many years has it been?
In dog years or real years?
Yeah, I think, dog years, 7 years? So it's been like 1.5 years, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
I mean, it was...
Time flies.
Raffaldini Vineyards. You had started, people were coming, but what I remember, Jay, about our visit together on camera, I know it was 10, 11 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Was that if you had a collection, a collection of historic artifacts, and the room that we were in for the interview, it was going to become more of a museum, if you will, a bigger collection. Whatever happened with that? Did that happen?
Well, it's interesting. So I had that right in when you walk in the entrance, and then you kind of pass through that to go right to the room, which is now the tasting area.
Right.
And what I noticed was nobody was paying attention. They just walked right past it.
Right.
So, and I was like, well, such an effort to really have these, because we had we have some art from the Etruscan period.
Yes.
We have some statues from like 1400s. Nobody. In fact, one guy put his hat on one of the statues.
On one of the statues?
Yeah, I was like, well, maybe it's not such a good idea to have art here. So that kind of went the way of the dodo bird.
Was it a nice hat?
Yeah. It wasn't a fedora or something.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
But it was nice. So now all that's residing in my house.
All right.
Yeah.
That's great.
But thanks for the memory.
All right.
Yeah.
For those who don't know who you are, you're Jay Raffaldini, Raffaldini Vineyards. Tell us about that journey that really took you from a point of not having a winery to a winery. But I'd like for us to go back, to some of that foundation period in your life of what brought you on such a road.
Okay. Well, my born and raised in New York City. My entire career has been at Wallstreet and continues to be on Wallstreet. I work on Wallstreet to this day. And I started in '85. And when I was in the mid-'90s, I was having some good success trading. And at the time, there was this older trader. He was like 40, right? And he said to me, he goes, "Come here, Sonny. Let me give you some advice." He said,
you were how old then?
34.
Okay, 34.
He was a dinosaur. He's 40.
Right.
And he said to me, "Let me tell you something, Sonny." He goes, "There are old traders and there are bold traders, but no old and bold traders. So you better have your second act planned out in your life before you get tapped on the shoulder." And so it gave me kind of like pause for thought. And then what I realized was, over my experience with meeting wealthy people, I've noticed that when their heirs inherit a portfolio that's liquid, like stocks and bonds, they're going to do bad things with it. Buy cars, houses, and just kind of generally piss it away.
Right.
Whereas if they have a stake in a company that they can't sell, they have to work at it to monetize it, and maybe they work together as a family. Maybe that's a better outcome.
Right.
That was kind of the grounding principle. And then what's that business? And for me, I've always loved wine.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea here is, how can I make the love of wine tie into this, generational wealth transference?
And that was the idea.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was not just to, let's buy some land, make some wine, make a lot of money and sell it, but literally you're thinking about that generational pass-through.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. And generally, growing up in an Italian family, we always had Sunday dinners together. It was not negotiable.
Right.
It was at 2:00. It lasted 3 hours, and that was it. Right? And you become, at my family, you kind of like stop halfway and then you play bocce.
Right.
And the passage from my boy to manhood was I was able to throw the ball as opposed to being a spotter, saying red's closer, green's closer. So that's when I became a man, right? I could throw a ball. Anyway, so I wanted to really have a way to keep the family together, because as I noticed was over time families tend to drift apart. And when it also spending time in a lot of the wine regions, I've noticed that it was a great centering tool for families. That they might go diaspora for various reasons, but they always came back for the harvest. They always came back for the joyous time. So it was kind of
reason.
Exactly. So the idea that here's a way to have a wealth transference, but also keep the family together. Because most businesses, they don't have that, magnetism.
Right, the family dynamic.
So once I had that figured out, then I needed to have a plan about, where to start the business. And because I worked in New York, it kind of ruled out the West Coast. It was just too far.
Sure.
And then if you wanted, back in year 2000, when I started to really kind of get serious about this, there's only 3 places that you can make wine in the East Coast. You have the Finger Lakes, upstate New York, but it's a little bit too cold to make reds. Okay. And then you have the North Fork of Long Island. And they're quite famous for a grape called Cab Franc, and you couldn't pay me to drink Cab Franc if my wife depended on it, right? And then you have Virginia. And, the more Virginia kept popping up on the radar screen, the more, North Carolina kept popping up quite far apart, but it was in the same time zone. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I should do that. And then I hired a consultant from Napa Valley, and we looked at 62 pieces of land until we found the one where the vineyard rests now.
Okay.
You can actually see Virginia border from the property, so it's kind of a continuation of the thread of the wine producing in Virginia.
What time period did that take? Because 60 pieces of land, that's a lot of looking.
Yeah, so the person who helped me look, he was a consultant for a vineyard called Ravenswood out in California. They make big zins. Sure. And he did it over about a year. So we started in 1990, and then I narrowed the piece of property down in 2000. And when we were getting ready to sign the contracts, actually my 40th birthday. And I remember I was signing the mortgage.
You were becoming an old man.
Yeah, exactly. The dreaded old man. Yeah. And I remember I was signing the mortgage, and we're about to go out to my party. My wife had a 40th birthday party for me, and we had Dean Martin playing in the background. And right as I'm signing the mortgage, a Dean Martin song comes on the radio and says, "Money burns a hole in my pocket." My wife's like, "That's a bad sign. This is not good." Little did I know how red she was.
Right.
And that was the start of the journey. And then, so the first part was having the right land, and when we talk about the right land, we're talking about the wrong land for farming, which is the right land for vineyard growing. Because historically, and it's going to be very low fertility. And because you want the grapes to struggle to survive. And if you look at all the vineyard sites around the world, they're in rocky, low fertility type of areas. And I bought the piece of land. With the time was 40 acres. I bought another 65 since.
Okay, so let me break that apart. So if the land has a lot of rich soil, then the idea is that the roots are not they're going to go down a little and then they're going to spread out.
Exactly.
But you're looking for land that the roots have to go deep to get their nutrition.
Yeah, and at the top part is the most fertile part. And if you have the vines are lazy. They become couch potatoes or just go laterally, and that's not where the good bits are. And so, but if you're a row crop farmer, that's what you want,
of course,
because you're not looking to go down deep,
right?
And so the problem initially in North Carolina was the first 10 or 15 years, really the first 10 years, I should say, a lot of the initial vineyards were people trying to repurpose the family farm. And that's not necessarily the proper place for a vineyard. I understand it while you try to keep it alive, but that doesn't mean you should grow, grapes on there.
Right.
Where you had corn and tobacco and things like that.
So you've got land, if I remember correct, one of the things that impressed me years ago when we first talked was that you have different, literally on your land, you have different photography. You have a scenario where you can grow different varieties because of elevation changes, and just slight movements can determine what variety would grow best, right?
Yeah, it's really quite shocking because grapes are the ultimate environmental sponge, meaning that they'll pick up their environment. Like in the fires in California, the grapes picked up the smoke. Okay, or you get some Australian wines and they have that taste and smell of eucalyptus. Well, it's because eucalyptus trees are planted nearby, so they really pick up the environment. And subtle shifts, like you can have 2 grapes that are 5 feet apart, one faces north and the other faces east, completely different taste profiles. There's nothing like it that is that sensitive to the overall environment, which is a challenge. So remember, in 2000 when I started, there was only 7 or 8 vineyards around, and I didn't know what the playbook was. So I planted 40 acres, and I wasn't satisfied with the quality, so I ripped out the entire vineyard 3 times over 20 years. I ripped out 100,000 vines.
So were you the winemaker from the beginning?
No. I'm the guy who says, this is not what I want.
Okay.
Right?
All right. That's what I thought.
Yeah, because what I do is, because of my job in Wallstreet, I have exposure to a lot of different, styles of wine. And I'm Italian, so I'm making Italian wines. So I know what a Sangiovese should taste like. Or a Barbera or a Montepulciano or things like that. So when I saw it coming off, I was like, nah, it's not good. So the initial mistake I made was I planted a lot of northern Italians because that's where my family is from. The reality is it's quite hot here versus northern Italy. This is more of a central to southern climate, Tuscan climate, Tuscany South. So the first rip out was I had the wrong grapes. I had northern Italian grapes. And then once
Were those big mistakes? Were those big financial mistakes?
Well, I think. Well, I'd say it's a learning process because what you're doing is, to quote Donald Rumsfeld, which I've never done in my entire life, by the way.
Here we go.
Right? You have known knowns and unknown unknowns and unknown knowns, right? And that was unknown unknowns.
Right.
That doesn't work. So now we started to narrow it down because unlike in California or the more mature regions, you know what's supposed to grow.
Right.
Now, I didn't have to rip them out. I could have sold those wines, but they weren't of the quality that I wanted. Because my name's on the label, so we're all about quality.
And it's your vineyard.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, so Barbera shouldn't grow here, Nebbiolo, they're all out.
Right.
So the second phase was I went further south to kind of like get to the Tuscany area. And then I said, okay, this tastes like a Sangiovese, but it might have had it in the wrong location on the property. I maybe should have been facing east as opposed to north to get more of the morning sunlight so it heats up. So that was another rip out.
So you're really looking at microclimates
100%.
then. Right.
100%.
Right.
And then after the third planting, which is done next year, we're finally done replanting. We know what grows where and their angle and everything. So it was a 21-year replant from the very first
So
year.
from the beginning, how many replants did you have?
Oh, well, the entire vineyard has been ripped out 3 times. So I've ripped out in stages. I would say every year I've done a replant.
Are you set now?
Yeah. Where's that now?
So when did that clock start of where, like, okay, everything is where it should be?
It started about 3 years ago.
Okay.
Then we're waiting on the last vines to come in now.
Okay.
So but think about it. As soon as you plant a vine, you can't get any usable grapes off of that for really 3 to 4 years.
Right.
So the vineyard is still remotely not even at full productivity yet after 20 years.
But in a couple of years, you're going to be at full production then, right?
Yeah, and if you take care of a vine, it will last 60, 80 years.
Right.
And the vine's kind of like us, right? So think about it. The first 10 or 15 years, it's a snotty adolescent. You just want to beat it to a pulp.
Right.
And then, years like 15 to 30, you started to see, okay, maybe he's not a juvenile delinquent after all.
Right.
And then from like years 30 to 50, it's in its maximum expression. And then like 50 to 70 kind of gracefully falls off and passes away. So the problem is that I'm going to be dead by the time all that happens. That's just happens, right?
Do you have I'm sure you have the notes for your children, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to be able, because the whole idea of this is to pass it on, right?
Yeah.
Are your kids excited about that?
Well, I have a daughter who's excited about the drinking aspect of it and the monetary aspect. The work part she hasn't quite figured out yet.
Right.
But they are. But also the nieces and nephews now are completely aligned.
Okay.
Yeah, and like one works in the tasting room, one's in social media, another does this and that. And whenever we have holidays, it's always here.
Right.
Everybody comes in from around the world.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really lovely.
Nice. That's a great thing. So that's wonderful. I mean, there's so many more things to talk about, but I think that gives us a nice overview of how this happened. is this your happy place now?
Yeah, it is. Well, for me, the vineyard is kind of like a yin and yang because on Wall Street, nobody's happy. You're always pissed off about something.
Right.
Didn't make enough money, reports late, whatever. Whereas when people go up to taste wine, everybody's happy. They're having a wonderful time. They're with their friends. They're relaxing. So it gives me balance in life, and that's the wonderful part. Because and when I'm there, people aren't asking me about what's going on with the yield curve, right? They're saying, "Oh, I really like this wine."
Of course,
it's a different experience.
It seems to me like you put together this utopia that truly. You're the notion of a Renaissance person, right? It's romanticized.
Very much so. Yeah.
But there is a way to have a piece of that, and it sounds like maybe you found a bit of that.
Well, I think whenever I'm with a big group, I'll tell them, if I asked all of you one question, each of you give me the exact same answer. Like, that's impossible. I said, well, here's the question: what's the greatest wine you've had in your entire life? And the reason you will give me the exact same answer, you should tell me naturally what the wine was, where you were, and who you're with. It just flows out. So wine is contextual.
Right.
It's, you know, and it could mean have to be a great bottle of wine. Could it be you with somebody you love the most in this great spot? That's what I'm trying to do.
And that makes the wine better.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
You know, 100%.
It's that whole experience, right?
Totally. The best wine I've had in my entire life, I was with my sister and my wife driving around Tuscany. GPSs for we're lost.
Right.
You know, it's telling to go right and left and there's only straight. That
Right.
thing. So it was around 2:30. We were hungry, and we pulled into this gas station, whatever, right? And they had food. And I said to the Zia, the aunt who came out, says, "Do you have any menu?" She goes, "No." I'm like, fine. I was determined to be in a bad mood. Just bring out what you have.
Right.
And she brought out the most amazing food. And they served wine in a plastic milk jug. And I was with the two people I love most in the world in Tuscany. I mean, it was, and that's the best bottle of wine I had because it was just changed my whole day.
Right.
And that's why wine to me is a very romantic, special notion. It's about the totality of the experience more than anything else.
I think that's an appropriate way to look at, how we consume everything we consume. It's better with people, right?
No question.
I mean, everything you're doing now, you're doing it because you're thinking of the future for other people, right?
Yep.
You're living your best life now, so that's
exactly.
good. So when you're in New York, sitting in your office with all the stress of the world floating everywhere, not only what you're doing, but people you're talking with, what are you thinking? Are you like, I can't wait to get out of here? Or does that feed you too? I mean, can we talk about that a little bit? Because you've got these very different sides of your life. And I remember that from when we first talked. You talked about these different things. And in full disclosure, when you came in, the first interview that we had, we were sitting there and we were talking, and I remember the conversation. But what I remember most is there were 2-3 beautiful bottles of Raffaldini wine sitting on the table with some glasses. But right beside that was a can of Tab. And you sipped that Tab the whole time. Yep. And I'm thinking to myself, trying not to be distracted and be in the moment, why is he drinking Tab? Why isn't he sipping his wine? And as I followed your life along and read things you've said and seen videos you've done, and you talked about, I want to make a lot of money so I can drink a lot, have a great time.
Indeed.
But I witnessed that your drinking at that moment was Tab.
Yeah, that's because Thomas told me not to drink. That's why.
Okay, that was the reason.
Otherwise, I would probably be under the table by now.
Well, you don't have that rule here, but I tried to find you a case of Tab, but they're a little. It's cost prohibitive. They haven't made it in how many years?
Yeah, they stopped it. In fact, I think it was the December before last was when they stopped producing it.
How'd you feel about that?
Well, it was kind of like you're in heroin. You're going off of heroin.
Right.
It was horrible. And then I went through a cocktail of various type of sodas, and I really struggled until they reformulated Coke Zero. and that was relatively close.
Similar then.
Yeah, but the thing about Tab that I adore was it had saccharin in it.
Right.
And that whole saccharin lab rat was just a bunch of hooey because I'm standing here and I drink 8 cans a day for 30 years.
Right.
So you could do the fact that anyway. So this is relatively close to Tab, but I did the math. So that's almost 100,000 cans of Tab I've drank in my life. That's enough to pay for one entire vineyard replant, right?
That's right. But it gave you joy.
It does. It does.
I mean, when you did you start drinking Tab in New York?
Started drinking Tab when I went to school.
Okay.
I was a sophomore at Georgetown, and I was dating a girl who had money, and I had no money, right? And she was drinking Tab because Tab was largely, in '81, it's marketed towards women. The container is pink and stuff, right? And I was like, I took a sip. I'm like, yeah, it's not too bad. Right. Well, we broke up like a month later, but I've been addicted to Tab for like 30, 40 years because of her.
You let her go, but you kept the Tab.
Exactly.
Were you, as you were walking out the door, were you like picking up a can of Tab as you were going? Bye, see you later.
Yeah, that's
put my Tab back. No, I'm not doing it.
Keep my clothes. I'm taking the Tab. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well, what a memory. It's funny what we remember, isn't it?
Indeed.
All right. So Tab's no more. Has therapy helped? I mean, have you been able to go beyond that?
Yeah, it was bumpy though,
right,
for a while. And the reason is I rarely drink water. In fact, that's probably the first sip of water I had in about 25 years. So it's just wow.
We laced it with the essence of Tab.
Exactly. It's just diet soda and wine.
Right.
And I do drink. I do enjoy wine very much.
Okay.
And one of the things I've noticed in the past 10 years or so in New York and San Francisco is I've seen wine not consumed at lunch as much as I used to. Yeah. I always, when I come to a nice restaurant, I'll scan across the room just to see who's drinking wine.
Right.
Not many. Whereas in Europe, it's still served all the time.
So why do you think that is?
I can't really figure it out. Once I remember I ordered a bottle of wine for the table at lunch. And the guys were like, dude.
Right.
I was like, well, what happened? Even in San Francisco and New York. It was surprising. And I can't really quite sort it out. Whereas, in wine-producing countries or Europe and the Mediterranean, even Australia, right, and Chile, right, it's no problem. So I can't quite figure out what it was. So it's kind of, a little bit disappointing to me.
Do you think maybe it's because, and I imagine it might be logical, that a lot of people have problems with drinking too much, and maybe that's an issue.
Yeah, I think, to your point is, I think I started drinking wine when I was 7 in my house.
Right.
They give you a little bit, and then they dip like a biscotti in it to kind of get exactly. So if you start drinking wine early, you don't think about it as something to get drunk with. It's kind of like getting drunk on milk. It's something that doesn't make sense. But if you're introduced to it later in your life, and then because it was a little bit prohibitive, then it's something to get you to the dark side.
It's like it's something it's not something that's normal to do unless you get a high from it.
Exactly.
So you're talking about you didn't get a buzz from having dip in your
you have half a glass of the bowl of pasta.
Yeah. It was just the cultural norm for you.
And that's what Europe is. Wine is introduced there is no drinking age in Europe. 0. I mean, you can start drinking any time. So I think that sort of says a lot as well.
Right. Wow. Well, we certainly don't want people to drink and drive drunk. That's not a good thing to do. Yeah. All right. So New York, you had some ups and downs in New York.
Yep.
If I understand right, you managed a massive portfolio, big dollars, and things went bad a couple of times.
Well, yep, they did in not 3 times. 1998, when Russia defaulted, that kind of set the whole world on its set, right? And then in 2002, which was the dot-com bust.
Right.
Then of course 2008.
Yeah.
Right. 2020 was not so much a big deal because they had learned the lesson in 2008.
Right.
But I run something called the hedge fund, and we can do anything. So the customers expect us never to lose money ever. That's
Right.
the deal. And you have those events like that. And, generally, if we're losing money, it's a disaster everywhere else because we were very risk conscious in how we manage. And so you kind of take off, you learn, okay, what happened there that we can do better? And then you have to rely on investors who have been with you long enough to understand you know how to come back from those type of situations. And so each time that we, managed money, we had a loss, we grew higher the next time in terms of our overall amount that we managed. So we kept growing.
So it was the volume that you were able to manage, not as much, or was it a bit of the knowledge that you had gained? I mean, there were some things. I mean, who could predict Russia doing its thing? Who could predict certain things happening? But yet, you do have to have a certain mindset in how you're managing your portfolio, right?
Yeah, so while you cannot predict when things are going to happen, there are certain things you can't predict on a behavioral basis. Like, this should happen if this happens.
Give us an example.
Well, for example, whenever there's a crisis, people flock to like the safest things. Okay, it's usually like U.S. Treasuries or investment grade bonds or like super safe companies like Duke Energy, things like that, right? So you're able to kind of figure that out, and you see when you start to sniff around, well, that should be happening over there. Let's start to move over here. So you're able to manage what you call black swan. Something comes out of nowhere. The key is how you adapt to that. Okay, and you got to be flexible. It's kind of like the vineyard's kind of the same thing, right? I could not I didn't have to rip everything out, but I adapted because I wanted to be prepared. And so when I came out for the second replant, I knew what I learned from the first replant made me more focused and more agile. See,
right.
So
right. That's what I was looking for. I was trying to figure out your experience in life up before you had the first grape in the ground, right?
Yeah.
The first vine in the ground. And then why were you aggressive in pulling that out? So if I'm understanding right and kind of extrapolating from your past in finance to becoming a farmer, right, and a winemaker, is you're like, oh, this isn't right, let's fix it now, and that way we can bank tomorrow's. We're going to be in a better shape to make what we want to make down the road.
I'll give you an example, and you're spot on. So you buy a stock that's at $10, okay? Now that stock goes to $8. Most investors buy more at $8. Okay, we get out.
Okay,
because we're wrong. If that we bought that stock at 10, and that stock goes to 15, most investors sell. We're buying more because we're right. It's in our it's working in our direction. It's in our favor. So we cut our losses quickly, pull out vines, and we add to what's working. So we have a saying in Wallstreet: do more of what's working and less of what's not working. Yeah. It's pretty basic, but it's very hard from a personality standpoint to admit you're wrong. I mean, we have people that always work with traders. The counselors, it didn't work out. Move on. Right. And that's tough because it's expensive to rip out a vineyard, but there's nothing more expensive than an average wine that nobody wants to buy. Right.
And so you're basically, if you continue to make the wine, then you're going to be stuck at an $8 bottle of wine. And you're wanting to make a $20 bottle of wine or a $30 bottle of wine.
40, 50.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly.
But you can't make that if you don't have the right ingredients.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, and so you have to focus on what's working and concentrate on that area. And many people don't, admitting defeat is really important because that's how you learn.
Sure.
Right. And that's a very, very scarce personality trait. So our best traders who work with us really are focused on cutting losses. Right.
So you support that philosophy. Okay, we make a few mistakes, but we correct. And then we move forward.
You have to because this is an unknown region, and I tell so I don't consider us really having a vineyard. It's more like an experimental piece of land because we're still testing. We'll know if still right now if we made the right decision in about 20 to 30 years as the wines kind of get to their potential. We think they were on a good path.
You know, there was another farmer in Virginia a long time ago that he did that. He became one of our founding fathers of this nation.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed, exactly.
I mean, he was like, let's try this, let's try that, let's try this, and he did. And I don't know that we would have the grapes we have here now if it weren't for Thomas
Very
Jefferson.
much so. Yeah, and that's the mentality. You know, you just have to try.
Right.
And we do the same thing in the winery. We do the same thing in the customer experience and how we're serving them and everything, start to finish.
So it's this amalgamation of your past experiences from a family standpoint, right? That cultural energy that you have, love of family, passion, it sounds like. And then you've got the financial side of where you've lived and survived through the trials and perfected the system, and now you're doing the same thing with this experimental piece of land.
Very much so. And I think,
That's great.
Because I travel extensively for my job, what I've noticed, whether I'm in South America, Asia, North-South Asia, or Africa, or even the Middle East, is that what I found out is that there's one commonality across humanity, and that is people want a better life for the children that they had for themselves.
Right.
And how you get there is different, but everyone talks about moving the next generation up, putting them on a platform for success. And to me, that's kind of guides a lot of what I do.
So do these cultural experiences, I'm going to ask you, I think you just answered it, but the cultural experiences you're having as you travel around the world, I mean, the United States, we're one nation and 197, right? So I think that's the number of current nations. And are you saying that everywhere you go, you're seeing validation for something you thought, and you're picking up things that, I didn't know that. That's a good thing. We can use that. Is that it?
So. Yeah, exactly.
Give us an example. What are some of the things you've picked up from around the world that's edified your life?
I'll give you one from a wine and one from a not wine.
Okay.
Once that I felt that we had the proper grapes, I came across an almost insurmountable problem. And that is that you really shouldn't grow grapes east of the Rocky Mountains. That's because 90% of the grapes are grown in what's known as a Mediterranean climate. That's 3% of the world's surface. So 3% of the world's surface makes 90% of the grapes because it's easy to grow grapes there.
Right.
So we're fighting nature every step of the way. I mean, maybe we play to a tie. Then that's like a huge win for us because it's raining, it's humid, everything, right? So when I went, I almost gave up, and I was in the northern part of Italy in the area called the Veneto, which is in between Venice and Milan, actually where my father's from. And the guy was complaining about the weather here is so crappy. I'm like, you have no idea what crappy weather is. And then he says, and then he opened a bottle of his wine, and it was tremendous. And I said, how did you do that? He says, well, we dry our wines. We dry our wines. So he taught me how to dry wine. And we dry more fruit than anyone in the country the past 7 years.
Wow.
So basically what they do, if you think about a grape, okay, it's born, it's kind of the size of a pea. It's really hard. It's all acid, no sugar. And then it grows over the course of the year. It gets bigger and bigger. So the acid goes down and the sugar goes up. And then you measure sugar in something called bricks.
Right.
Okay. And all grapes around the world get to 21 bricks. Doesn't matter where you are. Okay. And that's called the ripening. So the ripening stops at 21. Now here what happens is once you get to 21 bricks, the skin gets really soft, vulnerable to a lot of disease pressure. Okay, so what they do in Napa, because it's perfect, they're like, I'm going fishing, I'll be back in 3 weeks. So what happens is it starts to dehydrate on the vine. Becomes like a more raisiny.
Concentrated.
So 0 to 21 bricks is the ripening. 21 higher is the desiccation. Okay, and they harvest it at 27, 28 bricks, and you get this concentrated, beautiful, rich, ripe brown red. But you can't do that in North Carolina because at 21 bricks, the bloody thing falls apart. So when I went to the Veneto, he said to me, well, we dry them. So they pick them at the 21 level, but instead of processing them, they put them in these big drying rooms. These racks, floor-to-ceiling racks. They put one grape cluster at a time, and they put it in the drying room. They turn on the fans and the dehumidifiers, and 2 weeks later, it comes out at 27 bricks. same as what they
Look
do.
at that.
So I'm like, I could do this.
Yeah.
So we experimented for a while, and now we dried a tremendous, more than anyone in the country
Sure,
now.
sure.
I know other people in North Carolina are drying, and I'm thrilled about it because that's how we raise the quality bar. But think about it.
So were you the first in North Carolina to do
I was
that?
the first to Tyrese Coast.
Okay.
Yeah, probably I'd say, if not first in the country, one of the top 2 in the country. Yeah.
Wow.
But now I'm number 1 in the country, and we write papers about it and stuff like
Right.
that.
Do you have a sense of pride over that?
I do.
Yeah.
The process is called appassamento, which
Right.
means to make a raisin
Yeah.
in a time. We're raising amount. And so think about it. So let's assume that 50 tons goes in the drying room.
Right.
Okay. 2 weeks later, I sweat off about 25% of the water. Okay.
Mhm.
I just lost 25% of my production.
Right.
Think about how much we baby it. And then 2 weeks later, boom. So a ton gives you 60 cases. Okay. That's 1,200 bottles.
Right.
I lost 8-10 tons.
No, but there's a
12,000
payoff. I know
bottles.
it's coming. There's something exciting coming next, right?
Here's
I
the
can
exciting
hear it.
part.
I know
the
it's
quality
coming.
is really damn good. which is why we're
yeah.
able to charge $40 a bottle because it
Sure.
tastes like a $40 bottle of wine.
Because it is.
Exactly. See, a lot of people, they try to price wines
Right.
relative to their cost curve. If you're a customer, why do you care about how much it costs you to make
Right.
it? Does this taste like a $40 bottle of wine?
Right.
So that allows us to kind of elevate. So we're really about quality over quantity because we sweat off a lot of the quantity.
Sure. And you're doing the work. I mean, it's an extra step,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
There was an investment there, but you learn how to do this.
No question. And by when you dry it, what happens is by getting rid of the water, the ratio of sugar to water is quite high.
Right.
Sugar converts to alcohol. So generally, dried wines tend to be quite high in alcohol,
Right.
like 14, 15%, kind of that big monsters. And that's my house style.
Right.
I've always had every vineyard should have a style.
Right.
And I like big, tannic, dark reds.
Right. So you've got a robust flavor. It's
100%.
something that when someone tastes this, they're going to know
Very much.
that's a special glass of wine.
Yeah, and we also dry the whites. And in 2008, and I remember last time, President Obama served their wine at the White House,
Yes.
our Vermentino. In 2009, we were voted one of the top 10 new vineyards in the entire United States out of 4,000 vineyards.
Right.
First time anyone's ever won that in the East Coast. And our 97 Grande Reserva, a 2017 Grande Reserva, got 97 points. So we're kind of getting up there. So the problem we still have is what I call the North Carolina problem, is that as soon as you see a wine from North Carolina, if you haven't had North Carolina wines before, you're like, no thanks.
You
No
don't
thanks.
think. Right.
So we do a lot of blind tasting
Right.
against Napas and Super Tuscans and stuff like that. And we always tell people, just serve our wine in a brown bag.
Right. See what happens.
And ask them, see, is this from California or Tuscany? Don't say it's North Carolina because you're tipping your hand.
Of course.
And watch them divide, then you're like, guess where it's from. So that's going to take us a while to get to that quality point.
But it's a process.
Very much
It's a process, and you've got you have the goods now.
Yeah,
It's like you
exactly.
don't have to fake it. You're not taking an unsweated grape and putting an additive in it to give it this extra magical flavor.
Exactly.
Now, there may not be such a magical ingredient, but you're not doing that.
Exactly.
You're creating the. Okay, all right. So here we are. We know what's happening here in the Carolinas. People come. Here's my question.
Yeah.
So you're traveling. You're taking a few bottles with you to New York, right? So let's talk about what this is, how this is elevated, escalated, or neutralized your influence in New York. So when you're pouring a glass of Raffaldini wine for your friends who are accustomed to drinking really good wines, right? I'm sure you have clients that drink the best wines in the world.
They do.
And now they're having your wine from your vineyard, your family vineyard. Tell me what they say.
Yeah, so first of all, they're amazed that, A, we have electricity in North Carolina. Never mind that we make wine. That's kind of like, oh my God.
Oh my.
Yeah, once you get past that hurdle.
Right.
Then what we generally say, what I generally hear is, I didn't think you could make wines of this quality in North Carolina.
Right.
That's usually without exception. And for example, about right before COVID, I went down to Sao Paulo. We have a big investor in Sao Paulo, and I brought one of my wines, and he's like, I'm speechless. So that part's great. The problem we have...
Benny normally isn't speechless.
No, he talks more than I do. He's Italian. He's Brazilian Italian. It's like a natural disaster at the same time.
I just need to go a little deeper to make sure that he didn't talk. So, okay, all right.
That's lovely. But what I've also noticed is that even when we're with, clients that we're meeting for the first time.
Right. Yes, that's the one.
When you bring out a bottle of your wine, it is such an icebreaker at the table.
Oh, sure.
Because they know, I'm like, oh, you make wine? Whoa.
Right.
Where in California do you make wine? I don't make wine in California. I make wine in North Carolina. Where's North Carolina? Right? That's the whole secret of the conversation.
Right.
But it's such an icebreaker because usually if you enjoy food, you enjoy wine.
Of course.
And particularly if you have, a fair amount of financial means. Mm-hmm. But it's such it's an instant commonality of conversation. And for me, it's fantastic.
It kind of breaks the ice. I mean, more than breaks the ice, because it gives you a broader scope of conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
I would imagine that those business conversations and those meetings, when you're in that type of a more relaxed environment, regardless of the level of the economics, I'm guessing those are far more productive meetings.
100%. Yeah. And usually, because you usually don't even talk business until dessert.
Right.
And everybody's got to know each other. You relax. I mean, the first 10 minutes is brutal if you don't really know each other. Mm. And this kind of breaks it all open. And you have much higher, it's much more personal than in business. And then you talk business on a more personal basis. Right. It's really kind of a wonderful way to actually, which is why it's so sad that people aren't drinking wine at lunch.
Sure.
So, but it's really wonderful.
But let's break that down just a little bit more, because people listening might say, well, of course, people get drunk, they're going to do it. But I don't think it's that at all. I think it's if it's a really good glass of wine or whatever, right?
Yep.
It could be, there are people that specialize in different waters, and it's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
That's their thing. So it's that experience that you're having with someone.
Yep.
It's not about diluting your worries, mm-hmm. because the conversation is doing that, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the big generally happens is when they taste the wine, like, this reminds me of a wine I had, so-and-so, and then that starts the conversation down the path, and you're immediately bonding.
Right.
Over something that, you didn't know this person 2 minutes ago, and you're sharing a personal story.
I mean, it could be potato soup. It could be anything, the best Italian sauce. I know that's a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Well, that sauce is a little too. Who put sugar in that? Who doesn't put sugar? Exactly. All these different things. Yeah. And in Italy, my gosh, you've got all these variations, not only of wine, but olive oil. Everything is different, right?
I remember once I was in Rome, we're having Roman.
Right.
Dinner starts at like 10 o'clock. Okay, so I'm there. Right. So, we're four of us at the dinner table, myself and three Italians. One was from Rome, the other was from the north, and the other was from outside of Naples.
Right.
And we just, talking, enjoying around 12:30 in the morning. And then everything's going fine. And then all of a sudden, this violent discussion breaks out, and the guys are yelling at each other and speaking Italian. My Italian's not that good, so I said, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, we're talking about where the best panettone, which is Christmas cake, is made."
Right.
And I'm like back and forth, and so like, "Oh no, it's in Tuscany, it's in Naples," and I said, "I'll tell you what. You guys make it for me, and I'll taste it." You know nothing about panettone. Typical Italian.
You're not even qualified. Right?
I was dismissed out of hand.
But I'm guessing at the end of that time together, everybody loved everybody.
They were hugging and kissing each other.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Invitations to come to my house, break bread, and that sort of stuff.
I think that many of the problems that we have in the world now are because of lack of people doing what you and I are doing right now.
Yeah, I think so. But I believe that deeply.
I mean, there are certain inherent evil behaviors.
Yep.
And I'm not going to dismiss that.
Yep.
But there's no reason for the mass population to be in that boat.
I know. Yeah.
And we just shouldn't be.
No, it's a function of, a lot of things. For me, the one is that we just don't spend time with each other.
Yeah.
Because the more time you spend with each other, the more you see different sides. You know,
and the more that you, I'm not going to say you're okay with it, but you're mindful of it, and that's okay.
Exactly.
You don't have to agree with everybody's thing.
Exactly.
But at least here's a human, and they have a thought, and you have a thought, but you still like each other.
Exactly.
You know, it's still a good thing.
It's not an enemy thing.
Yeah.
I agree totally. So that's what I enjoy about wine so much.
I don't know, Jay. I mean, it really is that thing of how do we begin to tackle our societal issues without talking, you know?
I know.
I don't know why people litter. I don't know why we litter. Why would we have such beautiful area, such a wonderful place to live. Why would we throw trash out?
Best I can think of is people are just not connected to. You know, when you're by yourself, you don't take any ownership.
Right.
You know, one of my favorite expressions is, in history of the world, no one's ever washed a rental car. Okay. So unless you have that some connectivity to that item, or the item can be the environment, you're not really going to pay attention to it.
Yeah. So what do we do about it? I mean, obviously you're making wine, you're in the financial sector, you're doing things to help society in your way, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe some things you do is a little bit of impact, other things you do are massive impact, right? But from your seat, where you sit, and based upon the experience you've had in life, so I'm not talking to a teenager, I'm talking to somebody who's had enough ups and downs and lived through it and here and celebrating life right now. So what are your thoughts on what we can do from a societal standpoint? And if someone says, Jay, you know, how should we conduct our lives? What should we do? How can we have a better life and be a better part of society? What should we do?
You know, that's you know, my father taught me, or he said, no matter what you do in life, be the best at it. Be the most passionate. If you're sweeping a street, be the best sweet sweeper you can be. Right. Just do what you love. And the other thing he taught me was, a lot of things in life are random. Right, right place, right time, wrong place, wrong time, and you have to appreciate that. You can't, over penalize yourself because you're having bad luck, or you can't, extrapolate your brilliance when you're doing well. And you just stay in the middle of the road, be passionate. I think it's been in my guiding principle my entire life. And if you're passionate, then people will naturally get drawn to you. Your magnetism is pulling there, and then they're able to kind of see what you think about the journey.
You're being you.
Yeah,
you're being the best you can be. That's a popular thing now. That says be the most authentic self you can be, or that type of an idea. That's not a new idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we say it a little bit differently now.
Exactly.
But you've certainly been on that road.
Well, I mean, I am who I am, right? Some people don't like it, some people do. I don't care as long as, I'm transparent and honest.
They write songs about that.
Yeah, they can piss off and die, right?
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Tell us about these wines, because there's so many stories here. I've always loved your bottles. I always thought there was a story there. But
I'll start with this one. So this is our Montepulciano Reserva.
Right.
And you can see, so we initially, when we had the first bottle, we had a crest on it, the label. Mm-hmm. Then we realized that everybody's got a bloody crest.
Right.
So the idea was, what's iconic? And the villa, where you taste the wine, is kind of iconic.
Right.
So what it is, we kind of made the villa kind of faded out so it looks old. And you see this irregular ridge here?
Yes.
That is actually the profile of the mountains you see from the vineyard.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So this is our most common style of label. Mm-hmm. And for me, I want to evoke it's Italian, it's some age. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, I wanted to come up with a flagship wine and that we could really say this can go toe-to-toe with Napa. And we came up with it was called Grande Reserva, but we didn't want the same label because it has to stand out. And we put a bumblebee on here.
Love that.
And here's why it's a bumblebee. Because if you kind of research bumblebees, nature can't quite figure out how they're able to fly.
Yep.
Their body's kind of big, to their wings, they don't flap very hard. So all the, I guess, etymologists, right? All they've decided is that the bumblebee flies by the sheer force of its will. It defies nature. Okay, I should make a wine that's good in North Carolina. I defy nature. This is my bumblebee wine.
I love that.
That's the concept behind it.
So there's a real story behind there.
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, we wanted to, and I remember when I first came out with this, it was $60 a bottle. We made 200 cases. People were like, no one's going to pay for that in North Carolina.
Right. Gone.
4 months, it was gone.
Wow.
And that's because it's quality. It tastes like a $60 bottle of wine. And that's how we're kind of like pushing it. We just came out with a bottle called Patrimonio, which I didn't bring today. It has my father's picture on the label. And that's $105 a bottle because that can go toe to toe. We actually did a blind tasting with Opus One and did really well.
Really?
Yeah. So but you have to kind of like go out there a little bit just to probe, always test, see where the boundaries are. Otherwise, you'll never know because growth is only through trial and error.
Right.
If you're not trying, then you're not growing.
Right. Well, you've had success with your wine club, though, right? Hasn't that been good for you?
Yeah, it's been very good. So the villa now has 20,000 people a year coming through it.
Wow.
Yeah, and the wine club is big. What's nice is the wine club members bring other people to show off, and they become wine club members.
Right.
And we've had members that have been with us since the very beginning. It's wonderful.
You have a bit of that country club feel there. That idea of club members, friends, bringing friends there and sharing this special experience. I've been on your veranda, sit there and I look at the mountains. I'm like, this is great. That's a really nice experience. It's easy to relax. And then knowing that story about all the grapes that are grown there and the different climates. How many climates are there now? It's like 5 or 6,
Yeah,
right?
microclimates, yeah.
So you've got these different types of grapes just because of their positioning.
Yeah, it's really quite interesting. And the issue that we had was, the challenge that we had growing was, we had too many people coming. Because then it's noisy, it's not a good experience. So we went to this two-step phase of we went 21 and older,
right,
and no pets, and that was like Armageddon for some people.
Oh, sure.
Right, but then you have 20 kids running around unattended.
Right.
Then we went to reservation only. And that was profoundly significant. And then we actually went to the third part, which is table service only. So you sit down. You don't stand up and do tastings anymore. You sit down. We serve you. It's more of a hospitality-driven experience than just tasting wine at a bar. And this is wildly successful.
So that truly does elevate that experience.
Very much so.
So people aren't just walking off the street anymore.
No. In fact, most of the time we're saying, reservation, we're booked.
Right.
Which is unusual.
Because you are.
Yeah, exactly. And we want people to kind of, have that this is something special. It's not, you're not, standing at a bar just drinking wine and getting drunk.
Right. Well, I think that's great that you've taken your vision, your dream, and making it happen.
Yeah. So I kind of had a 25-year business plan, if you can believe it. So the first part was to establish myself. Okay, and, to figure out what to grow and everything. Right. The second part was to buy land around me and sell it to like-minded people. Okay. So a family friend of ours, Dr. Piccioni at Piccioni Vineyards, is adjacent to us. Okay. He's doing Italian varietals, right? And then we have Castello Barone and Sotrio also having Italian style wines. And so Dr. Piccioni's open, we're open, and they're opening up now. So I'm surrounded by vines, and you have 4 Italian vineyards adjacent to each other.
Right.
There's nothing like this in the world. We're adjacent to each other, so you can come and then spend your entire day there.
Right, and you've got, so yours is set down reservation only, and then one would be open for people walking straight in, and you have these different cultural experiences.
Exactly, and different house styles of the wine.
Sure.
And we all grow one white in common and one red in common, so you can see the different ways to make a Monticello, different ways to make a Vermentino. It's because it's the same grape. That really magnifies it, because the second part is the community aspect.
Right. Talk about that.
Right. That we're all supporting each other. Like we said, okay, boy, if you like this style of Vermentino, go here or come here and try that. And so then people, then they're there for the entire day visiting all 4. They don't have to drive 20 miles to go to the next one. And that's super successful. And now the last part of it is the secondary, tertiary businesses, and that's the restaurant cottages.
Right. Talk about that.
Yeah, so this is what my sister Barbara's doing. Okay. So right when you drive in, there's an empty spot of about 5 acres that are empty. So we're going to create not so much a restaurant, I would say kind of like an Italian market.
Okay.
where you can get the paninis, the pizzas, the gelatos, that sort of stuff, and sit there and enjoy it, because nobody wants to. If you're tasting, if you're going to visit Fort Vineyards, you don't want to sit down for an hour and a half.
Sure. Right.
And then have the salamis and cheeses hanging.
Nice.
Right? Yep. And then she's going to have these individual Tuscan style cottages that you can rent and spend the weekend there.
Oh, that's great. Now, how far along is that in the progress?
It's getting there. So I would say we should break ground probably in 24, early 24.
Oh, that's next year.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
Yeah, and then that way people can spend the night and go back and forth. Somebody said the only thing you're missing is a zip line. I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea.
A zip line?
Alcohol to zip line. Exactly. That's just a perfect idea. That's not happening. What could possibly go wrong with that scenario?
I bet the bouncer come up with that idea. Right?
Exactly.
We don't bounce here.
Exactly.
There's no need.
Exactly. But I think looking back, it's really where I thought it would be, meaning that I knew it would be a tough financial slog, but I knew that going into it,
right?
Because the capital expenditures to do this are enormous. And everybody tell me the Vineyard, hey, you know how to make $1 million? You start with $5 million. I said, but what you're missing is that once all of that is done, the future generations don't have to do anything.
Right.
And they live off of this. They draw off of it. They work it together. They don't have the financial obligation, which is why when you go to Europe and the other places, each generation has no cost of land. No
because
cost of production.
That's taken care of.
Exactly. They're just doing replants and vines that die along the way. It's really that generational wealth transference I was referring to.
Isn't this a mindset, though? It's not... I always found it interesting as I began to study the humanities and I look at societies around the world, and even here in the United States, and I look, what was it before the United States? Yeah. So then we look at our indigenous tribes. Yeah. And I was spending several months in Cherokee and understanding that culture and understanding the heritage aspect of it. And this notion that, when you reach a certain age, you don't leave the tribe,
Exactly.
Mom and dad, and then grandmother and grandfather, they're still there. Yeah. And the grandparents help raise the kids so they get the benefit of the wisdom while mom and dad's out doing more work, right?
And elevating themselves.
Exactly. So it's that community aspect. Yeah. And now we have this societal notion, all right, you go to elementary school, you go to high school, you go to college, and then get the heck out.
I know.
Yeah. And you're being, I don't know, pushed, and we're talking about probably taboo for a lot of people to have this conversation. But when we're looking at how do we help our society improve and be better, there's something to be said for a nosy neighbor.
Yeah.
Because they're not, they just care, right? They're not like intruding. They're kind of looking out after you.
Yeah, and when you go to the Mediterranean countries, you have multi-generations living in a house. And
it's a beautiful experience.
It's expected.
Yeah.
It would be dishonorable to make them go to some nursing home.
Yeah. So what are you going to do about that, Jay? I mean, here you are. Here you're in New York. You're down the coast, and you've got a vineyard here. Well, what are we going to do to help nurture that notion that we're better together than separate?
Yeah. So I'm 62, and I probably have maybe 4 more years left because all my initial partners have long retired.
What's wrong? You got a disease?
I have a vineyard.
Oh!
Keeps asking me for more money. That's why.
Okay. All right.
You need what equipment that you needed that you had to have?
He says you got 4 more years. I was like, no, you mean in working?
At Wallstreet.
Oh, in Wallstreet. Oh, I thought you was telling us something.
No. I'm at Wallstreet.
We'll support you. We'll talk.
I appreciate that.
We won't let you. You won't be alone.
No, exactly. So the idea is that once that winds down, then I can really focus on the property totality. And I needed to make sure that my sister's project was up and running. Everything was sustained. My neighbors are up and running and sustaining.
So you're saying that in 4 years, you're actually going to be able to work full time in the winery business.
In the winery business, finally. After 27 years.
Wow. Yeah. Are you excited about that?
I am, because it's such a happy place. The the conversations are joyful. The experiences are just meaningful. It's well, and it just life slows down just a little bit more.
You can be busy and slow down at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Here's something that I think is worth conversation. So I've interviewed a lot of people, 70, 80, 90 years old, who are very productive in life.
Yeah, totally.
And then I've interviewed people who are younger, who it's always been that the young people know better, and then it's like, there's always been that discussion back and forth. I think it's very magical when the two come together.
That's
right?
no question.
So when you've got an eagerness to learn and to do things, and then you've got this sage wisdom on the other side of people who have walked through it, I think that blending is magical. Have you been able to do that in your business?
Yeah, very much. And I think I like to remind the young people is that, whatever you have yet to experience, I've experienced.
Right. And you've lived through it.
So it's funny because I'm the oldest person on the company. When times are booming and the markets are booming, guys like me are not at a premium. They're like, why are we paying Raffaldini so much bloody money? He's so expensive old guy. But when it's the fan, I'm like, where's the guy with the gray hair? I need to talk to him.
That's right.
He survived a few wars, right?
Yeah.
So
well, you got to fix a problem.
Exactly. It's like, maybe he's not so useless after all.
Right. Well, you know that call's going to come, though.
Oh, it always does. Right now, the phone's ringing out the hook because everybody's nervous, right? So when times are fat and lazy, they don't think, everything in life mean reverts.
Right.
And I tell the guys, don't get too excited, don't get too depressed. Just focus on your job, be passionate.
Yeah. That's a good way to kind of navigate the waters for no matter where you are, right?
Mm-hmm. No much so.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah. Life usually gets better. We just don't see it. It's kind of like erosion at the beach.
Right.
If you're looking at it every day, you don't see it, but you come back 5 years later, half the beach is gone.
Right.
So it's a forest from the trees as well. So life gets incrementally better. But it's so imperceptible, you don't really see it unless you come back and you're like, wow, life is much better.
Right.
So that's what's been it's kind of my goal in my life, to really appreciate those moments.
Now, that's an interesting analogy that you compared the land literally eroding under your feet to life getting better. But I get the idea. Though, right?
I mean, another way to say it is, you can always buy oceanfront property on 2nd Avenue if you're patient enough, right?
Just wait. Just wait.
Exactly.
First Avenue is going to be a lot cheaper in about 40 years.
Exactly.
You can build a bridge to it.
That's usually the way.
I think the idea is having the conversations, and that idea. I was talking to a friend a few nights ago, and he was telling me about a new book that he had fallen in love with, and I'd heard the book and started listening to it on Audible, but I stopped because it was a lot of philosophy, and I just finished a couple of big books, and I was like, I'll get back to that later. But this guy was so turned on. It was like he'd gotten a few chapters in, and he heard something, and it was a Greek philosophy, and it was great. And it's one of those things that if you've dealt with a lot of problems in your life, you've already listened to that chapter and utilized the knowledge from there.
Exactly.
But here he is in his 70s, and it's changed his life. That one little idea, of, hey, life, you don't have to be controlled by what other people think. That's not where we gauge our success or not.
No. I'm a big believer in just slowing down and spending time with the people. That's really what matters.
Really is the people.
Yeah. Always was.
So a good glass of wine.
Yep.
From good ground. With dried grapes. Right?
Dried grapes.
And some conversation, maybe a little prosciutto and some nice cheese.
And no focus on time. That's the thing. Is we worry about time. And really, the thing about Europe that I love so much is nobody focuses on time. Right? I mean, dinner starts at 8. Usually people get there at 8:15.
It's okay.
You're not ordering till 9, but you're having so much fun. And this obsession is, I got to go. I have a spin class or Pilates or I have to do something. You don't have that there. So the beauty of Europe, for me, Europe being the southern Mediterranean countries, is that less is more. And I've tried to use that in my life is, something simple at the right time with the right person is so meaningful to me. And because what else is there in life?
Right.
So that's been kind of my mantra.
It's a good way to live.
And I think so.
Yeah. We can do that here.
Good.
We can do that here, right? I mean,
I think so.
you're doing a little bit of that on your 100 and some acres, right?
Yeah, so we're trying.
But you're doing some of that, right?
Yeah, so Our State magazine did I think we were one of the 7 prettiest places, and they interviewed me for it. And I said, I like this place because when I walk on the property, it's my exhale moment. I just feel the weight of the world. And I want that to be everyone's exhale moment. Right. When they're not, okay, let's just hang out here for a little bit longer.
Right.
That's what I'm going for.
And that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jay Raffaldini, what a wonderful time we've had together. Tabless.
Yeah, but the memory lives on.
But we definitely have
hang this up in my house.
We definitely have a memory.
Very kind of you.
Well, it truly was a memory, and it was a great memory.
And in honor of my TED Talk as well, I'm leaving very happy young man with gifts, because I'm leaving both of these bottles for you guys to enjoy.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so
that's
I appreciate
fantastic.
That.
Well, really the TED Talk I thought was great, because when I heard that, I said, where's he going with that? And then you gave it away. You really weren't going anywhere with it. You didn't know a darn thing about jellyfish. I love that story.
Where the guy was micing me up, he's like, I don't know about your speech, dude.
You knew nothing about jellyfish, other than the fact that they're mindless. And
exactly.
It's so random.
I really had a ton of fun with that.
Yeah.
Because that's what, because people talk about all their accomplishments and they're drawing on, but that's the TED Talk should be motivational or inspirational. Right. They don't want to hear you do a victory lap. How would somebody cares about that? So, you fall down, but you gotta just get back up.
Perfection is so hard to quantify, and it's boring if you're in the depths of despair. You're like, I'm suicidal, and you're telling me how great it is, and how good you are.
Exactly. Gee, thanks,
Jay.
My pleasure.
Great to
Thank
see
you much.
It's been wonderful.
Always. Let's do it again, but let's not wait 10 years. Huh?
Yeah. All right. We won't. We got to do it before we die.
More than 4 years, right?
That was so hard to hear. I mean, I literally thought you were telling me you had some sort of terminal or something.
My drink is red wine on drink.
Thanks for listening to the Life in the Carolinas podcast. If you enjoyed your time with us, please visit the show's website at lifeinthecarolinas.com. Join our mailing list, and we'll keep you updated every week on what we have coming up and other interesting things around the Carolinas. We value you as a podcast subscriber. We'll see you next week. And remember what Carl says, it's never a bad time for a good story.